Okay, so children, in our last class we did a story, that is The Case for the Difference. So as you all know, The Case for the Difference is written by the English novelist. It is a short story written by Graham Greene, which you can see here in the first three lines of the paragraph. So it was actually published in 1947. Okay, so it is a collection of the 19th stories, that the stories that were written in the 19th century. Okay, so the author had written the story earlier in the year 1940s during the winter time. It was 14th of February. Okay, so what you got to, and later on it was published in 1947. So here the setting takes place in England, and the main event, which was where the main event to the story began where Mrs. Parker was killed. She was murdered, isn't it? And took place in Northwood Street. So she was killed in England in Northwood Street. Okay. So the author has written the short story in past tense. Okay. So now it is difficult to tell who is the main character. This is because Graham Greene has written the story in a subjectively form which explains the I. Okay. So the character who are written most about though are Mr. Adams. As I have explained you in the first class, it is the lady who is being murdered is Mrs. Parker, and Mr. Adam, we address Mr. Adams as the culprit. Okay, and Mrs. Salmon is the person, the 56-year-old lady, as I have explained to you in Google Meet. I hope you all can recall that. Mrs. Salmon was 56 years of age, who had seen the murder, and she was the sole witness. Okay, and Adam is the character in the story who is the main suspect. That means the culprit, a criminal, okay, of killing Mrs. Parker, who is being murdered in where? The Northwood Street. Okay. So now, see here, Mrs. Salmon is one of the four witnesses to the crime that Mr. Adams committed. Okay. Now see, she is also described as the most honest, caring and kind witness of them all. Why? Because she is so confident, courageous in order to bring the truth. Because she had seen the murder. As I had told you, firstly, it was because of the moonlight she had seen the face of the murderer. And secondly, it was because of the lamp street that was focusing directly on the face of Mr. Adams. Okay, and later on when she goes to the courtroom, unfortunately the advocate, they present a twin, or the twin of Mr. Adams, and he has also been described as a man with a thick stout body with muscular legs and bulging eyes, the exact image of his brother. Either it was innocent, either the one, that means Mr. Adam is innocent, or either he is guilty. We cannot say that. Why? Because Mr. Adam and his brother, they resembled one another. They were the twins. Okay? So no one could find out who was the real person who was guilty, who was the murderer. Okay? So now, Mr. Adams turned out to be sensitive as well, because in the end of the story where one of the Adams gets hit by a bus, he cries and cries. Mrs. Salmon wasn't stated with any description of physical appearances, because when both the brothers come out of the courtroom, what happens is that one of the brother, he dies in a bus accident, isn't it? So when one brother gets killed, the other one, who was the twin of the first one who gets killed, was the brother of the killed one. So he cries and cries. Okay. So Mrs. Salmon wasn't stated with any descriptions of physical appearances, and she was unaware. Okay, like she was unaware of who was the real killer, because both of them were same. exactly the same. So just because it is mentioned by the alibis. Alibis means the accent, the physical appearances, isn't it? So just the fact that she spoke very firmly with confidence, as mentioned, okay, as I have told you, she was very confident to tell that yes, I had him with a hammer in his hand, and he was trying to hide the hammer in Mrs. Parker's garden. Yeah. So Mrs. Salmon is a dynamic, round character in this story because she changes beyond the events. So Mrs. Salmon was at first completely sure that Mr. Adams in the dock was the man who had killed Mrs. Parker. That was until she saw the twin in the back of the coat. She then became insecure. The three characters are believable because after all the short story might as well be true. So this is not a story which is based on a real event, but this is a fiction. Okay. So what is the most important event in the story is, when Mrs. Salmon gets a chance in court to confirm her evidence, but she refuses and denies at last. I believe this is important because if this short story is based on something true, or it might as well be the wrong words said of Mrs. Salmon would depend on a man's life. Now, see, we have gone through the story, and I hope you all liked the story, isn't it? Mrs. Parker who was murdered, and see here you can see Mr. Adams. Mr. Adams is the culprit, and Mrs. Salmon over here. Mrs. Salmon is the sole witness, and these are the three characters. So what would we get from the story is that, see, we are no one to judge somebody, right? We are no one. Why? Because we also might not be true in some sense, okay? And whatever we say or whatever we tell to the other person may not always be correct. Okay, so you need to watch your words before you speak. Alright, because the wrong words or the bad words we use to address or tell someone might hurt the other person very badly, that one day or the other the same thing might happen to you, and you have no right to hurt the other person, isn't it? So here Mrs. Salmon, she was not very confident, though she was telling the thing that Mr. Adam had killed Mrs. Parker in a very confident manner, but at last when the other person, the same similar person was brought in front of her, at that time she was unable to tell that yes, Mr. Adam is the murderer and he is the culprit. Why? Because she was confused at that time, isn't it? So it is okay, it is very good to be confident, to gain confidence, but children, you should never be judgmental about the other person, and until and unless you are 100% sure of the words, then only open your mouth. You need to watch your words before speaking. Okay? So this is a theme that we get from this story. By reading the main plot of this short story, it should give everybody a heads up. The plot is moved around and not chronological. Means bookish. Okay? So no need to learn this. So in the last paragraph you see, I think the theme of the story is not to judge someone before you are 100% assured of that the person who are signing a death sentence to is guilty. That means this is very important for you all to know. The theme of the story is to not judge someone. See, don't you ever dare and tell bad words to someone before you are 100% assured of that the person you are signing a death sentence to is guilty. Okay.